Letter 4. Miriam was ill, and she felt very much so, having awakened with runny nose and a feeling of a sizable ball in her throat. That was probably because of crazy fun with friends that they had in the first spring rain that year.
Oh, how stupid I was,
thought Miriam, remembering all the jumping puddles competitions in the schoolyard.
I wonder how Lucy and Mary are.
Miriam thought about her friends, with whom she was shaking branches of the old lime trees, shouting, "Shower, shower, healing shower." That day Miriam took a shower many times, and it was her first experience with this continental novelty, which did not seem to catch on in London. This shower did not turn out to be healing for Miriam, not at all. She was now lying in her bed drinking hot tea with raspberry jam. The letter from William Turner was waiting on her bedside table, but Miriam did not feel strong enough to take it. Finally, after the last gulp of this terribly sweet tea, she reached out for the letter from her old, very old friend.
Dear friend, have you ever felt, unfulfilled? I mean, that you couldn't discover something that you feel would change your whole life? This distressing and even frightening hunch accompanied me just like my own shadow until 1819. In that year, I experienced the most incredible and unforgettable journey which totally changed me, my way of looking at the world, and my approach to painting. Since that time, I had started painting my truly own masterpieces, with which I was finally pleased. Remember, travel broadens the mind. Yes, I couldn't agree more with this wise saying. So today I want to tell you a story about a man called William, who had fallen in love with a country which had the biggest influence on his whole life. I mean, a ravishingly sunny country shaped like a tap dancer thigh boot. It all began on a beautiful August morning when I was looking at sketches of other artists' works, obviously mostly Claude's works, which presented landscapes of Italy. I was studying them for a long time when I decided that to paint a truly perfect painting of anything, in that case I meant Italy, I had to see it for myself. The greatest, the most exciting and the pivotal journey actually began in a smelly and rusty train to the Lyon station. I got to my dream Italy by crossing the Mont Cenis Pass in the Alps. And you know what, my dear friend? If I had to describe this amazing country using one word only, I would just say lightness. What surprised me the most there, and what I picked up just as I crossed the border, was an incredible and dazzling power of light. Never before have I felt so deep brightness, which was like a powerful king of the sky who bodies every single segment of the earth using light rays. At the same time, I found out that I should be a king of my painting, who formed every detail using the brightness of paints, which I would make my works full of life and depth. That was my biggest discovery, which was a key to success in my whole painting career. I was enamored with the beauty of landscapes which surrounded me, and I was continuing my dream journey. I headed for Venice and Verona. In the former, I stayed for longer in the Leo Bianco Hotel. My daily routine included watching each and every sunrise and sunset over this beautiful town of Venice. I will never forget sitting on one of the Venetian bridges with my feet immersed in water and my attempts to capture the light on the buildings, waves, and trees. Being in Venice was like being in the center of lightness, which I recognize and try to understand its nature and functions. The fruit of my observations and thoughts was a painting painted with a lightness brush, the sun of Venice going to sea. Well, actually, that was one of my few pictures which meant something more for me than just a basic canvas streaked with paint. Every day during my stay in Venice, I went across the oldest bridge over Canale Grande called Rialto. I thought that it was duty to perpetuate this place not only in my memory, but also on canvas. Name of that painting wasn't really original, just simple, Venice the Rialto. I thought that it wasn't necessary to make huge poetry of the title. As I was pacing areas of Lazio region, which is located near Tivoli town, I was following the path and contemplating environs when suddenly I heard folk tunes played on reeds. After a while, a group of pipers loomed out of the tree shadow. They were going to Rome for Christmas as musos. I will never forget this beautiful sight of singing pipers pacing through sunny Lazio. Paintings on which I perpetuate this unforgettable experience I called Modern Italy, de Ferrari. During my old travels to Italy, I tried to paint or make sketches of all the famous and interesting buildings, monuments, and views in that country. Most of all, on my paintings, I wanted to show the British the power of Italian light, so that they would get to know that there exist dazzling sunbeams which picture our world more cheerfully and more beautifully than continuous rain and constantly overcast British skies. All in all, I travelled to Italy 3 times. Each of these journeys was just like an expedition to the world of expressive and vivid tints and Catholic light. I finally understood that the sunbeam is truly powerful magic in the painting. Depending on its strength, direction, and extensiveness, each object is perceived in a different way. I started to discover factor of painting luminous reflections and attach much more importance to tints than to forms. My palette of dark tints changed into the palette of full bright tints. Colors and light became my superpowers, which enabled me to express my own feelings and my own way of perceiving the beauty of the world around us on canvas. I gradually became the master in using these 2 factors in my works, as you can see in my oil painting, light and color. Well, I could the smallest one luminous finer points present without using shadow, and because of super intensive colors in my paintings, I was hailed as a Paganini palette. I was playing as much as I could with air to obtain perfect whirlwinds and other atmospheric phenomena. I unceasingly experimented with tints because I wanted people to feel things in my painting which actually are not possible to paint. For instance, speed. In the painting Rain, Steam and Speed, I wanted to show these 3 elements as exploded atoms of art magic. It was my purpose to make people feel an approaching train with wind in their hair and their foreheads wet as they were looking at this masterpiece. I hope that I succeeded, because I had risked my life standing next to the tracks and meticulously watching trains approaching at top speed, concurrently trying to make more or less accurate sketches from bigger or smaller distance. Painting is not only putting paint on canvas with your brush. Painting is like a beautiful symphony, which is a combination of emotions, experience, poetry, imagination, which you present using brushes, sponges, a palette knife, your thumb, and a brush handle. As Leonardo said, the painting is like poetry, which you feel instead of seeing. I used to put some mottos, quotes from poetry, usually of James Thomson, I Love the Seasons, or John Milton in the titles of my works. I do love poetry and literature. My sketches are still full of my own or somebody else's poems, but apart from poetry, what's really important in the art of painting is music. I used to play the flute, but I did it much worse than playing with brushes. Every time I was painting, I created a new orchestra full of tints, different tones and shapes, which together made beautiful symphonies of painted music. During painting, Beethoven really often accompanied me. Actually, his music breathed life into my picture Landscape with Walton Bridges, which presented deeply experienced unity with nature. During my second visit to Italy, my prime destination was Rome, where I stayed for 3 months, but it wasn't an idle time. I worked really intensely. I started 8 or 10 new paintings, but I finished only 3, which I presented on exhibition in London. More than 1,000 people came to see my works in elegant chambers of Palazzo Trulli. 3 of my works, which I remember went to the exhibition, were Sight of Orvieto, Regulus, and Vision of Medea. As it always happened, critics varied in their opinions. There were 2 clubs. Members of the first one looked at my works with enthusiasm, and of the other rather with disgust. A British politician, I even don't remember his monkey surname, said that Vision of Medea was like a sloppy, glaring, and too extravagant canvas, which was likely to be understood as a joke in a bad taste. But you know what? I don't care. These are my canvases, and you have nothing to say. As other, better experts unanimously admitted my paintings were full of strong light and bright colors, which were much different from old masters' schemes from whom I used to draw inspiration in my youth. I created my own unique and original style of painting. Some people said that I just needed time to mature and find my own way in painting, which some people didn't like. On the other hand, some were fascinated with it. What saddened me the most was human incomprehension, a deep contempt for work of others. People simply liked to laugh at my love of light, thereby of color yellow, which is always a lot in my paintings. Many times I saw caricatures of my person. Caricaturists usually presented me painting with a floor cloth dangling on broomstick with a bucket of yellow paint at my leg. Fortunately, my dear friend John Ruskin always supported me and was my staunch defender, just like true friend should be. What a long story it was. Sometimes my life was as twisted as a snail shell, but for sure it tasted better than its content, the thing they fed me in Paris. Always remember, no matter what others say, do what you think is right and good. Okay, it is enough for today. I should go, and again help in something to my neighbor. Oh, why life is so unbearable. All the best. William Turner. P.S. Dear Mrs. Romerson, I would be much honored if you accept my kind invitation to have a cup of coffee with you and with Miss Miriam at Verona Cafe next Friday. Let me send a special for your answer and information what time would suit you and Miss Miriam to spread a cab.
What day is today?
Was the first thought which came to Miriam's mind after she had finished reading the letter.
Okay, it's Thursday. But which Friday will be the next Friday? Tomorrow or next week?
Miriam checked the post stamp and realized that the next Friday would be tomorrow.
I must see him,
said Miriam to herself as Giotto, for some unknown reason, was gauging about the neighborhood, looking for something, or maybe for some pretty kitty, considering the season.
I need to know what happened with him, how it happened, and who is he now?
Miriam remembered all the letters from William Turner, from the first one till the one of today. She remembered this irritating, conceited guy, able to think solely about his singularity and a permanent greatness, and tried to find any link between the former William Turner and the one about whom she learned from these two last letters. Finally, she recalled their first meeting at the National Gallery, impetuous decision, and the sense of unusual mutual understanding which they had felt from the very first moment. And she realized that William Turner wanted to tell her about himself without beating about the bush, without pretending, just about himself as he was. Why? Because he wanted to show her how pathetic a man thinking first about himself and his own career is, and how great he can be if he will put the beauty and art first, to bring them to other people.
I must be in a good shape tomorrow,
shouted Miriam through the window to Giotto, shambling in the street. Miriam was not healthy, neither on Friday, nor on Saturday, nor even on Sunday, which brought so much sun to Londoners that all the city parks filled immediately with crowds of pale people, surfacing from their flats like whales, dashing up to gulp some air after lazy sailing in the dark depths of the ocean. The Miriam's family left to the nearest park just after the breakfast, leaving her flooded in reflections, sweetened with cherry cakes made by Mrs. Romerson. Miriam was upset. Since the early Friday, when it had become clear that the chat with William Turner over the cup of chocolate will not be feasible, she felt an irritation, possible to be managed only by cherry cakes, which constituted a standing equipment of the Romersons' house.
Always the same. Whenever I'm expecting something really interesting, some catastrophe must happen to make it impossible.
Like for all girls at her age, verbs like always or never constituted an essential element of multiple theories, explaining functioning of the universe around them, even when based on a single experience.
Ugh, I'm so fed up with these cakes. I will never have them again,
concluded Miriam, crumbing last piece taken from the plate on the ledge behind the window for crowded dogs.